is my pleasure to introduce one of Newbury Court's favorite sons, Frederick Moyer. Anyone who has attended any of his previous concerts here will undoubtedly remember how much more he brings to his concerts than simply a beautifully executed performance. Fred gives us personal context for his music choices and always brings up interesting stories that added value to music. His program today reflects his broad range of musical abilities and interest. He's going to take us from Bach to Beethoven to Debussy and on to Art Tatum. As usual, I will add my reminder to silence your cell phones, please. And I know you'll help me give a warm welcome to Fred Moyer.
There we go. Well, thank you so much for having me back once again. I've lost count how many times. I think the first year I came here was around 1995. And so it's been almost 25 years. Well, I don't think you've seen the latest, which is pictures out of my little screen setup. That, of course, is J.S. Bach. And he had 21 kids. Well, his wives had 21 kids. He had 2 wives at different times. And he was very attentive to his children's musical upbringing. And we have these wonderful little notebooks, some of them still around. This is one of them, the front cover. This is clever, I can't even pronounce it, but it's a notebook that he kept for his oldest son, and a lot of his children got their own notebook where he would write in it little hints on how to play a turn or do a Morton or a trill or whatever, and he would often copy out pieces that he wanted that child to learn. And in this particular notebook for Wilhelm Friedemann Bach, his oldest son, is a little finger exercise. It's basically for the left hand. You can see that pattern in the left hand. It's basically, and there are chords in the right hand. It's beautiful music, but it's essentially a technical exercise for his son to learn how to play fast with the left hand. Well, this next person, Alexander Salati, who was a Russian pianist, a great pianist, very important figure in music. He was a conductor. He premiered a lot of Tchaikovsky's big orchestra pieces. He actually was the older cousin to Sergei Rachmaninoff, and he taught Rachmaninoff at the Moscow Conservatory. Anyway, Salati took a look at this little exercise that I showed you and slowed it. It's a really ingenious piece, and how it shows also how you can do anything with Bach and it'll still sound good. He takes this fast piece and slows it way, way down and puts the tune now in the right hand, as you'll see, and turns it into the most hauntingly beautiful piece. You would just never know that it started out as this technical exercise for his son, Wilhelm Friedemann. Well, that is a good warm-up piece for this, this next work by Beethoven. This is the Waldstein Sonata by this very serious composer. I always like to find connections, though, between classical music and jazz, and there's so many. You notice that I'm going to be playing some Art Tatum at the end, so it's not totally inappropriate to point out, how much these fellows were famous for their improvising. We hear all the time about jazz improvisation, but Bach was a great improviser, and I'll be talking a little more about that later. But Beethoven, too, as a young man, he was a virtuoso pianist, and people came from all over as much to hear him improvise as to hear him play his own compositions. And he could take a tune that somebody would scribble out from the front row of the audience and take a look at it and just sit down, and off he'd go with fantasies and variations and sonatas and all kinds of pieces. And it was just evidently astounding. But this is a work that, in a way, shows the difference between classical and jazz. And this is a real elbow grease product, the idea of revision. And Beethoven had all these sketchbooks. I should have put a picture of that. These scribbled out sketchbooks where you can see the evolution of these great works. And this is a work that came from his middle period. He had very clearly 3 periods in his output. And so this is from the time of his 5th and his 6th symphonies and the Appassionata Sonata, these big dramatic works. And he wrote this one for one of his benefactors, a Count Waldstein, who helped him financially and was actually a very fine pianist. And that's one of the reasons that Beethoven decided to really give the pianist a workout in this piece. He wanted to have something for Count Waldstein to really sink his teeth into. It starts out with this very energetic first movement, just bristling with energy, and it's got a lot of hammered sections, as you'll see. And then, of course, other lyrical places too, but it's very exciting. Then the second movement he wrote and then tossed it out. In fact, well, he didn't toss it out, he turned that original slow movement into another piece called Andante Favori, and then rewrote the second movement. And it's basically an introduction to the last movement. It's very slow, but quite short. And it leads without pause into the last movement, which is a rondo. And a rondo, if you think of a circle, it's a piece where the tune will recur. You have the tune, the main theme, and then a digression, and then it comes back. The tune keeps coming back. And the rondo theme in this Waldstein Sonata is really one of the most beautiful things that Beethoven ever wrote. It's just so magnificent. So here is this powerful work, one of the 32 piano sonatas, Beethoven, Waldstein. Well, I thought I would play something kind of quiet after that. And something perfect to coming after Beethoven's Waldstein is this work by Schubert, who lived in Vienna at just a little after Beethoven's time. Beethoven lived in Vienna. And Schubert loved to get together with his friends in these wonderful musical soirees where he would sometimes hold forth at the piano. You can see in this little dramatic picture of Schubert with his elegant friends. He wasn't really a concert pianist, and yet he loved to play the piano and wrote great piano music. And he would sometimes improvise, and everyone get up and start dancing. And I just thought that's just an amazing thing to imagine, dancing as Schubert was improvising at the piano. But he wrote these 8 impromptus that have that spontaneity and spirit that you expect in an improvisation. And one of the things I love about these 8 impromptus, especially this one, is how, on one hand, you can hear it's just great, great music, and yet on the other hand, it has this freedom about it, where if you think about him improvising this, and I don't know if he really did, but you can get the sense that he doesn't know where the music's going. Wherever it seems to want to go, he just goes there. He turns on a dime. And you'll also hear in this piece why he is often considered the greatest melodist that classical music has ever produced, because this piece is just melody, melody, melody throughout. So here is the Schubert Impromptu in G flat. Well, moving on in the history of music, we have Debussy now, who is a great way to begin the 20th century. He came up with so many ideas that people like Gershwin and jazz pianists and movie composers took and ran with. And so if you say, oh, this sounds a lot like Gershwin's Rhapsody in Blue or whatever, realize that he came first. He was the pioneer. And yet he adored Bach. And this is, believe it or not, Debussy's homage to Bach, Suite pour the piano. Bach wrote lots of suites, which are essentially collections of dances that were current during Bach's lifetime. They always started with a prelude, so we have a prelude here, and then the dance form that Debussy writes is a sarabande, which is a very slow, stately dance in 3. And there's a little subtle push on the second beat sometimes. So you have to listen for it to go 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And it doesn't hit you over the head, but it's very charming. And then the last movement of a Bach suite would be a gigue, very fast dance. And here Debussy takes a little artistic license and writes a toccata. And Bach wrote lots of toccatas. In fact, he often improvised these toccatas. They're literally touch pieces that he would play on the organ or the harpsichord or clavichord to get to know the touch of the instrument. So they're very busy pieces, and this one is certainly very busy indeed. It's an incredibly colorful piece. It's got mystery and triumph, and it's fun, and it's jazzy. It's got everything in it. Suite pour the piano. Debbie's. has been a heavy program. And I thought maybe I would finish with something kind of fun and light, and this is a perfect guy to do it. Art Tatum, you can see from his picture, he was partially blind, legally blind. He could see a little fuzz in certain parts of his one eye, but how he jumped around this piano, I don't know. I shouldn't say jumped around, he ate this thing alive. There was nobody in jazz piano who was the equivalent ever, before or since, of Art Tatum. I mean, people like Horowitz or Rachmaninoff would play their recital at Carnegie Hall, then they'd race down to this club where Art Tatum was playing, and they'd spend the rest of the night with their jaw on the floor. And so I've been, as you may know, been transcribing all kinds of jazz pianists over the past 12 years or so, and it's become a wonderful obsession of mine. I have this computer program called the Amazing Slowdowner, and when you hear this, you'll realize why you need the Amazing Slowdowner to to figure this music out. And of course, every time that he would play it, it would be different, and that's what's so great about jazz. And in fact, shameless plug, I just came out with a book of these transcriptions, not just Art Tatum, but Oscar Peterson and Errol Garner and Bill Evans and Herbie and Chick Corea and all the rest. So here is Get Happy. if I could make one other shameless plug. Just about 2 weeks ago, I came out with my latest CD, which is the complete works of cello and piano of Beethoven, with Nancy Green, who is my cousin, my mother's brother's daughter, and she studied with Jacqueline Dupre and some other very fine people. If you're at all interested in any of these items, you don't need to have cash. I know where you all live. And my mom knows all of you too. No, if you'd like something, just tell us who you are and what you're taking, and I'll keep track. But again, thank you so much for having me. Thank you, Jim.